All right. The title of this basically says it all. But Michael, I'm going to go to you first, and then Matt, I want your perspective as someone that's been in franchising with as much experience as you have, how you look at this. But Michael, my perspective is in the space of higher end children's education, private equity has definitely stepped in as big of a way as they possibly can. And so from my perspective, there's two routes here. You could either look at private equity as a resource, there's resources behind it, or you could look at it as there's a microscope on P&Ls. And when there's a microscope on P&Ls, sacrifices can potentially be made by the franchisor, or decisions can have some hurdles that come alongside it. And so now we're not necessarily always playing for the benefit of the franchise owner. We might be playing for the benefit of a P&L, or the idea that a business is going to flip every 3 to 5 years. So with that being said, you guys have remained private, owned, family owned. What do you see as the reasoning? I would love for anybody that's watching this to hear that point of differentiation, as well as what's your vision on that category period.
Yeah, again, so we're extremely grateful to be in the industry that we are. We're able to have such a positive impact, and we're also very proud to be family owned. We're able to maintain the culture and the foundation that were established by my dad and my uncle, all those many years ago. And again, there are pros and there are advantages and there's disadvantages to being part of a private equity run company. We feel like it's what's best for us at this time is to be where we are at. Again, right now we're operations driven and focused on the brand. Whereas private equity, again, we don't have the restrictions that some others in our industry do. Our management team is built exclusively with operations experience, and we're able to make decisions without a large board that either doesn't care or maybe doesn't understand the consequences of some of their requirements. We don't have the required, private equity required quotas on a quarterly basis, or some of the roadblocks that could restrict what we feel is important for us to do. I know during COVID, one of the things we're extremely proud about is we had a zero closure rate. We had 100% PPP and grant funding rate with our franchise owners, and that's because of the dedication of our team. Again, we have several franchisees that were in other brands or part of other brands, not in this industry, but other franchise brands. And they each made a point to come up to us afterwards and tell us how much they appreciated the support and some of the interim processes that we put in place to keep everybody afloat. Every single person on our team was able to pivot in what they were doing to the needs of what the franchisees were at that time, and we all gave 110% to make sure we could do everything that it was possible to keep everybody successful during that time.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm hearing out of your voice is the ability to pivot fast versus and frankly, the autonomy is owned by you. Like you can say, like, I don't need to make another buck today. Let's go ahead and give that back to the franchise owner. Matt, you've obviously been in various situations and have seen both sides. How do you see this as a benefit when you're talking to a candidate about why Children's Lighthouse?
So a couple of pieces. One, our franchisees don't have to worry that there's going to be a sudden change in fee strategy or culture based on new investor, because that's kind of how that model works. They want to flip these every 5 to 7 years. We recently had a prospect who had attended another discovery day from a big company. I won't name their name, but the entire C-suite was totally new and had just started. Some of them weren't even from the industry, and this is a very specialized business. I think there are a lot of benefits as far as having a business that really rarely do you see a franchise. It's the same basic people who built the franchise are still running it, and I think that's really rare. A big thing is our fees aren't as high. Frankly, we're not trying to nickel and dime a lot of the franchise fees that we have. Just example, we have a national ad fund that pays for our websites and marketing tools, PR, etc. Ours is half of 1%. We've got competitors, it's 4%. And you start doing the math, that's $90,000 a year in additional fees that should be going in their pocket. And we think our marketing is just as good as not better. So when we're looking at this, how can we create a really successful business for our franchisees, but we want to provide top level support. We have only 15 schools per franchise business coach. Our competitors have 40, 50, even more. So is that the most profitable thing? Could we make more money if we had 50? Yeah, but it's the right thing to do, to frankly overinvest in operations support, to have best in class support. I think that's one reason in our history, we've never had an SBA failure, which is mind boggling to me, being in franchising as many years, because that number is normally 20% or higher. So you look at all that together, it's a different kind of business. We're looking for long-term growth. We're not looking at 10 quarters in the future. We're looking at 10 years in the future, and we have a long-term focus for sure.
I mean, Matt, that's such a huge statement. And maybe it's just how novice majority of franchise owners are, whether it's a $10 million investment or it's a $1 investment. Most are novice, especially when you're getting into franchising. But if I'm thinking through, like, I'm going to invest, we'll keep this category specific. I'm going to invest in children's education and a higher end investments. If you're buying into a brand that's backed by private equity, that 5 to 7 year flip is most likely going to happen. Also, the candidate is not trained or conditioned on how to do due diligence on the private equity fund that owns the brands.
Right.
And typically, as a part of their due diligence, they're not reaching out to that PE firm and saying, can we talk to you about the process? Because PE firm removes themselves from that equation. But the reality is what they're going to do, you said new leadership team comes into brand X. What they're going to do can have direct influence and impact back to that franchisee. So I would imagine, like, if you get a candidate on the phone, you have the ability to talk about this stuff, but to the outside world, a candidate that's out there might not even understand that there is a clear advantage, unless there's a great private equity group or family office that owns the business. There's a clear advantage for you guys to not be owned by outside money, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we don't have quotas we want to sell quite a few franchises, but we're going to be pretty picky who joins us. We're not, trying to flip it. So we're not trying to sell 50 or 60, and sometimes you can lower the bar if you're just trying to hit a number. For us, it's making sure it's the right fit, both, not only financially, culturally, and they're going to be a long-term play. And so,
we've always had again, from day one, we've had a very measured approach to growth. It wasn't to expand rapidly unless we were able to support it. Our first goal was to establish that foundation, build the infrastructure, and then after that, we would grow at a rate we feel like we can support. Again, the focus is on the franchisee's success and the success of the brand, not the success of how quickly we can grow.
Well, Michael, I mean, like it's such an easy concept of what you just said, but so many franchisors focus on selling deals versus making their current franchisees fatter and happier. And when you have a great foundation and you give fatter, happier franchisees the opportunity to continue to grow their businesses, what they end up doing is they end up scaling with your business. And so an insight that you just said on the COVID side is you have franchisees who have ownership in other brands. And if they're looking apples to apples on what is the definition of support, which support comes out of the royalty that you pay, they're like, here's brand X, here's how I felt here, and here's you guys, and here's how I felt. And how I felt, the feeling, the emotional side, the support structure, the scale, et cetera, felt more in tune or cultural match to those franchisees. And the only way you could do that is if you could say, I got to make a decision today that's going to impact my franchisees positively for the future, right?
Right. Well, and again, it was very beneficial to the brand because they were able to maintain a successful operations. And we actually did, we were referred other franchisees from our existing franchisees that had a group of people or possibly other people from the other brands that they were involved in, and they referred them over to us directly because of that situation during COVID. So, again, we truly feel that if you're doing the right things for the right reasons, you'll be successful.
Matt, another thing I heard out of what Michael just said is the depth of the support structure, the operational background of the people that are on the leadership team. For your experience in franchising, how does this level of support compare to other brands? Not necessarily in a negative way, but how is this different for a franchisee that's coming in based on what you've seen on the size of the business and how much infrastructure is around the franchisee?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I've never seen as much, experience, just total number of years of experience. I mean, we talk about, so like, I don't know, 200 years. We've got a VP of operations who's been doing this for 30 years. Our, director of curriculum's been doing this for 35 years. Our team is, our director of operations she's worked for Children's Lighthouse from being a school teacher all the way up to director of operations for 20 years, as long as Michael has been here. And so we know every specific thing that's going to happen, and right and wrong in these schools. And we often say there's nothing you're going to experience that we haven't dealt with. And so there's a lot of fear, frankly, of opening any franchise. We'll often say, if you're not scared in the process, there's something wrong with you, because it is scary. But especially you're dealing with children, people's most precious asset, and we want to make sure we're taking care of them. And so having that support, and the reality is we have a proven model that's been successful for many, literally decades. And there's, just like any franchise, we've made all the mistakes you would make trying to figure out this model. But having the just the experience level, and if you just look at our system in general, most of our people here have been over 10 years. I've been here too, and I'm the rookie of the team, even though I've been in franchising a long time. So this is a real specialized industry specifically. This is not like a home services franchise. There's just a lot of knowledge that you need, and having this is really important. But we also, beyond Children's Lighthouse, we've had people who've worked at Goddard. We've had Children's Courtyard, and so we have gotten some perspective from those long-term players. But we have a seasoned group of really solid people and incredible training systems for sure.
Michael, out of curiosity, when you're having discussions with a candidate or current franchisee, I'm curious, does the discussion or the question ever come to you of, are you going to sell? Will you sell? Is that even in the discussion?
Yeah, people do ask us, and what I tell them every time is, again, at this time we're focused solely on operations. We're focused on the brand. Again, and that's one of the things that goes into our decision making. Our horizon isn't for the next quarter or building up numbers for the next quarter. It's to build up for the next generation, for hopefully my children or the next generation. And so that's kind of what our focus is on, and it's not on any type of short-term goals.
Do you think people understand that? Like from my standpoint, and I'm going to say this bluntly, if I'm looking at a giant investment comparative, like it's the top, I would over index on how I'm evaluating what you just said. And you said, I'm hopefully building a business that my children can be involved with. That would give me more comfort in knowing that the team and infrastructure that's around me is going to be there in some capacity, whether it's this generation or the next, to support the investment a big risk that I'm taking for my family to try to build wealth for my family. And so what you're saying is so powerful. Do they really get what you're saying? Because it is so valuable if you're going apples to apples and looking at similar investments or other types of franchises.
No, absolutely. And a lot of our current franchisees that have gone through the discovery process have told us during that process, they're able to feel the culture that we have. Again, my dad and my uncle founded the company and created that foundation and the culture, so that they were able to turn it over to my generation. And again, my goal is to turn it over to the next generation. And so those foundations and that culture is still here. And from what franchisees are telling us is that it's very noticeable when they do their discovery.
Matt, Michael obviously says this with conviction. Like there's other brands out there, and you and I know this, that
Sure.
it's not wrong. It's business that most franchisors are building to exit. But this is so rare to have a brand with this much legacy, this much support, this much depth on the leadership team that's been around for a long time.
Right.
This is rare. And so I think there's a bigger message here for buyers out there. If you're looking at an investment in this category at this type, like it's going to sound like blowing smoke, but it feels like from business structure of keeping it family owned, like that seemed pretty powerful.
Yeah, that's what drew me to it. I've been, brand president for 20 plus years. And, when this opportunity came up after another company I was with sold to another private equity group, another story, it really resonated. It's a different feel. It's a family culture, and just long-term, it feels like somewhere where, for me, it could be home. And that's what we talk to prospects, that it can be home for you. And we want that for parents when they walk in the doors and tour our schools. And so you really get access to a leadership team that listens and acts quickly. We're not a boardroom full of investors, and we can, make things happen and move very, very quickly. But we also, during our discovery day process, we're going to have a dinner the night before they tour a school in our home office. And most of the time it's Michael and his wife getting to know them on a personal level and then sharing the stories as of kind of how they started, but kind of his vision in the future. But, we often say, if you want to call Michael on Sunday night and you have a problem, he'll pick up the phone. I don't know any other private equity or most franchises that's going to happen. And again, it's a definite culture for sure, and something that I think resonates with a lot of people.
Michael, I'm going to make a statement because I assume this to be the case, and correct me if I'm wrong. But because of the backstory of how this grew up in your family and has continued on, it almost feels like you feel you have a responsibility to keep it like this because of the story, the backstory behind the business. And that gives you the governor to say no when private equity starts waving fancy check numbers in your face. You're not going to entertain it because you feel you have a responsibility back to the story of the business. Is that accurate?
No, yeah. I mean, again, that's very true. Not just with myself, but with the entire team. We, again, because of the culture that was created and that we have here, I feel like I have a duty to maintain that. It was very successful, and it's something I'm very passionate about, and I feel is very important to not just this business, but in general, is to maintain that culture and the mission that we stand for. And so again, I do everything that I can to keep that, as well as our team. Our team shares that same philosophy. They 100% bought into our culture, and it trickles down from there. Our franchisees, we definitely have franchisees that come to us that they're attracted to the industry because of the strong demand and the profitability, but they also have a passion for childcare and for education. They want to be in an industry that makes an impact, just like we do. And so by the culture that we have and the team that we have that shares that passion, it also attracts franchisees that feel that same way. And of course, from there, it trickles down to the schools, and you can feel it in the schools. There's a distinct culture at our schools, at a school level, that parents will talk about.
I want to make a few statements, and then Matt, if you just want to close by giving just a state of where the business is at today, in case someone's watching this and is engaged in it. But one, in franchising, I haven't seen due diligence hit private equity. I think that's a takeaway from this discussion, that if you are a buyer and you're looking in this industry, if there's another owner, of the business, you need to also do your due diligence with that owner to make sure that they align culturally with you, because the shifts, so what Matt said, make a change in all the leadership team, you're starting over from scratch. Different opinions can make different impacts back to the investment that you made. And I think that's an important mark. Two is, every franchisee that I've ever spoke with looks at two things: the business model and the culture. And clearly this business model is significant. It's been around for a long time. You look at any trend reports into the next year around the New Year's turn, children's education is always on that list of something that is sustainable and continues to be a great category. There's clearly a demand for this on both the real estate side, because you have to, in some situations, go find the land, and on the customer side, like they need this in their marketplaces, which is why brands can continue to grow in this category. And on the culture side, we just heard it from Michael and Matt that there's tremendous care. There's something that is intangible here that can't be seen on a website, can't be seen unless you really feel it. And you can feel some of the energy on this call. But for a candidate that's thinking about a brand, make sure you line back to a culture that feels like they're going to have your back throughout this process. Matt, in closing, can you give us any of the audience a sense of what's going on with the business, how it stands, how did this year go?
Yeah, we're going to end up having a record year. We are going in really outside of Texas aggressively for the first year. We've really kind of had measured growth for many years, but this year we're expanding into Tennessee, Missouri, Florida, Indiana. So we're really expanding. Well, in a smart way. We want to provide the same service to families around the country, and so the demand is unlike anything we've seen. We have waiting lists in schools all over the country, and we're building a brand that franchisees want to grow with long term. We're selling a lot of additional second, third locations to existing owners, which to me is probably the greatest testament to a franchise. They feel good enough about it that they're going to continue to invest. And we're not a brand that investors want to flip. We're a long-term play, and it's a unique model, unique family culture, and we're excited about 2026 for sure.
I'm going to put this statement on here. What Matt just said, franchisees expanding, that means the expectations were also met. And so that's a cultural thing. If you're honest in the sales process and it is what you expected, then you continue to scale. Michael, any closing thoughts?
No, I appreciate it. We're very excited for how 2025 turned out, and we can't wait for 2026 and how the industry it goes.
Love it. Lots of new insights, especially as it comes around doing due diligence into the culture side, private equity or privately owned. For Michael and Matt, I'm Nick. Thanks for joining us. Go to the Children's Lighthouse franchise site if you'd like to learn more about the franchise opportunity. Take care.